Soft wind, gentle creaking of wood, faint echoes of ice cracking in the distance. Have you ever heard of a ship that sails upward, against gravity, across the frozen skin of the world, long ago, when the northern sky still shimmered with secrets? And the gods whispered through sea mist. There was a crew of Icelandic sailors who set out not for treasure, but for silence. They were hunting the sound of the Icean, old superstition among mariners. It was said that if you listened closely, the glacier spoke. It's not in words, but in long moaning sighs.
No.
If you followed those sighs far enough, north, they would lead you to a place no map dared mark. They left in the twilight month, when the sun barely kissed the waves and the stars flickered low like watchful eyes. Their ship was sturdy, carved from black spruce and sealed with wall oil. The captain was a quiet man, his name forgotten, though some say he could read the wind like a book. The sea welcomed them at first, but then came the cloud, a slow-moving bruise across the sky. It made no sound, cast no shadow, but chilled their bones as if they had stepped into the breath of something ancient. And then the storm began, not with thunder, not with rain, but with stillness so deep the men could hear their own hearts ticking like clocks. What they saw next, no one alive can truly say, except for one. He washed ashore weeks later, clothes frozen to his skin, eyes wide as if staring still at something no man was meant to see. He never spoke again, not in any tongue they knew, but in the coldest nights. He whispered things, strange syllables, dokas from ice. The sea had stilled, not a wave, not a ripple. The sails hung limp as though exhausted from their journey. And then the cloud moved, slowly, unnaturally, like something alive. The Vikings stood in silence. These were not men easily shaken hardened. Icelanders, used to cold and shadow.
No?
But now their knuckles whitened around oars and axes. The wind that came next was no wind at all. It breathed upward from beneath the sea, carrying the smell of old stone and forgotten depths. Then the water froze. Not entirely, but along its surface, thin layer of shimmering frost stretched out like glass. The ship glided forward, not rowed, not driven, but pulled, as if by invisible hands. The glacier appeared from the mist, not with grandeur, but inevitability. Towering, sheer, slick with blue ice and memory, a wall against the sky, and the ship began to rise, not against the wind, but up it along the frozen vein of sea that led into the heights. No one screamed. No one spoke, because they all knew. They had crossed into something that was no longer part of the world. The glacier did not welcome them. It accepted them. The ship scraped against the frozen path, yet made no sound. Its wooden hull somehow gliding across the ice without friction. Below, the frost looked clear as glass, and some claimed they could see things beneath it, faces, bones, maybe even memories that weren't theirs. The air changed. It wasn't colder, it was thinner, as though they had risen beyond weather itself. Sounds seemed too dull. Voices, when spoken, felt swallowed. One of the younger Vikings, Iver, son of Mar, leaned over the side and stared too long into the glacier's depths. When he looked back up, his eyes were wet and wide. "I saw my mother," he whispered, but she was still dying. No one replied. Above them, the ice curved inward like a tunnel. They were no longer sailing across the world, they were sailing through it. Time itself seemed to stutter. Hair grew long in moments, metal tarnished and cleared again. At the end of the ascent, a wall of blue light shimmered across the path like a curtain. They were being invited or tested. The curtain shimmered like liquid eyes, neither solid nor vapor. It stretched across the path like a veil of memory, blue and gold and colorless all at once. No wind blew. The ship had stopped moving, not stuck, but waiting. One of the elder Vikings, Skeetle, the broad, stepped forward. It was not a man given 2 words, but he placed his palm against the glowing wall. It didn't burn. It sang not a song of music, but of moments. The death of his father, the birth of his daughter, the feeling of swinging an axe into the sea, all at once. All now. He fell to his knees, not in pain, but in remembrance. Then, without order, without rowing, the ship passed through. Light folded in on itself. The deck seemed to stretch and then shrink. The crew held onto the rails, though nothing shook. Their eyes watered, but they did not blink. And then silence, a different kind of silence. As if they had stepped outside the story the world had been telling, and before them, no sky, no glacier, only whiteness. A plain of still frost, lit by a sun that had never risen. The ship creaked, not from motion, but from stillness. The plain stretched endlessly, white and smooth like the surface of a frozen sea, yet the ship did not sink. It simply sat, as if placed there by a careful hand. No wind touched their faces. No sound met their ears, but their eyes began to drift downward. The frost beneath them was not just solid, it was clear. And beneath that clarity, shadows moved. At first just flickers, shapes, then limbs, faces. Some were animal, others weren't. Ivar dropped to his knees there. Following us, he whispered, "They're us," Kettle murmured. The crew watched as shadows beneath the ice mirrored their every move. A second ship, a second crew, the same gestures, the same fear, but then one of the reflections looked up and smiled. It began with the youngest. Bajang, barely a man, leaned over the edge to stare at his own reflection. For a moment, he smiled. Then his eyes grew hollow, and he was gone. Not in a flash, not in a scream, just absent. His cloak lay where he stood. His axe clattered gently to the deck. The others turned, stunned, but no one spoke. Next was Scully, then Ormer, then two more. Always the same. A moment of stillness, a pause in breath, then absence. No struggle, no trace. The ship began to feel heavier and lighter at once. As if reality were unsure what to do with what remained, Kettle clutched his axe with both hands, not to fight but to feel. He locked eyes with Ivor. "Don't blink," he whispered. "Not even once." And beneath the ice, the reflections no longer copied. They waited. There were no more voices, no footfalls, no breath but his. Ivar stood alone on the deck, the frost creeping inward from the railings, painting runes of silence. The figures beneath the ice had all turned toward him, not moving, not smiling, but just waiting. And then a crack, not from the glacier. From time, the frost split beneath his feet like a mirror breaking in slow motion. Light poured up, soft, golden, and endless. He closed his eyes. When they found him weeks later, washed ashore on a desolate beach of western Iceland, he was barefoot, covered in rime, and staring at nothing. He didn't recognize anyone. He didn't know his own name, spoke only in strange syllables, sometimes singing them in his sleep. A priest tried to exorcise him. A poet tried to record him. A Volva listened for 3 days, then went silent forever. The ship was never found, but sometimes in the northern mist, sailors still speak of a longboat sliding upward toward a place no map dares show, and beneath the ice, eyes still watch.